Hello everyone, my name is Marin Guevara, and I'd just like to thank everyone who is, clicking on this video, any returning viewers, any new viewers. Today I thought I'd do another installment on my book and movie discussions where I discuss a story, the original text, and then an adaptation of it. And today it's going to be about a story that is near and dear to my heart, and that is The Little Mermaid. So we will be discussing the original fairy tale by Hans Christian Andersen, and then the Disney adaptation from 1989. The Little Mermaid is actually a Danish fairy tale that was written by Hans Christian Andersen, and we follow a little mermaid who is the youngest daughter of the Merman King, or the Sea King. And upon her 15th birthday, she is allowed to journey to the surface and view the human world for the first time. And while she is up there, she ends up saving a prince who is drowning at sea and ends up falling in love with him. And then upon learning from her grandmother that humans have immortal souls, unlike mermaids who, upon death, turn to sea foam, she becomes very adamant on joining the human world and being with her prince and obtaining an immortal soul, because she is told by her grandmother that the only way a mermaid can get a human soul is if a human falls in love with them and marries them. And her desires become so great that she seeks out a sea witch who could help her become human. Now, the sea witch agrees. However, there are a few caveats to their deal. One, she'll have to give up her voice. Two, when she does have legs, she will feel immense pain when walking. And three, should she fail to win the prince's love and he ends up falling in love and marrying another woman, her heart will break and she will turn into sea foam. The Little Mermaid agrees, takes the potion that the witch gives her, and then journeys to the prince's palace and is found by him. And the prince sort of takes her in as his foundling, and while he adores her, while he does love her, he never thinks of marrying her. One day, the prince and the Little Mermaid and his entourage journey out to sea to visit a princess that the prince is basically engaged to, and it is discovered that this princess is the woman who found the prince on the shore. And he immediately is overjoyed. They get married, and the Little Mermaid basically waits for her demise upon sunrise. She is visited by her sisters and gifted a knife. If she uses this knife to stab the prince in the heart and allow his blood to drip on her feet, she'll turn back into a mermaid and she can go home. However, the Little Mermaid can't do that, and instead throws away the dagger and throws herself into the sea. However, instead of turning into sea foam, she becomes what is known as a daughter of the air. Basically spirits who can earn their way, or earn a means to get an immortal soul by doing good deeds to mankind for 300 years. Now, I first read an abridged version of this back when I was a kid. It was part of the Favorite Fairy Tales Treasury. I remember getting to the very end and just being distraught, because at that time I had watched the Disney version first. So I was not prepared for the ending of what was to come. I even remember flipping back through the pages to see if I missed anything, but no, it ended that way. However, revisiting this story now as an adult, this is definitely one of my favorite fairy tales ever. One thing I firstly want to note is that it's just beautifully written. I know this was originally written in Danish, but the English translation is just fantastic as well. There's just some beautiful imagery that is brought up here. I'll read some of it. So, for instance, she soon ventured up again, and it was just as if all the stars of heaven were falling in showers around about her. She had never seen such magic fires. Great suns whirled round, gorgeous firefish hung in the blue air, and all was reflected in the calm and glassy sea. And what I love about The Little Mermaid, and honestly with a lot of Hans Christian Andersen's fairy tales, is that when you compare them to other fairy tales, for instance, Brothers Grimm, Little Red Riding Hood, or, something like Bluebeard, or maybe, Rapunzel, you do get a sense that they're a bit more moralistic, that they're the priority is to impart a message. But what I love about The Little Mermaid and Hans Christian Andersen's fairy tales is that the stories are they're much more personal. I get the sense that these stories come from a personal place with the author. And in many respects, I'm kind of reminded of Thomas Hardy when I'm reading The Little Mermaid, in the sense that, tragic things happen in the story. There's unrequited love, sacrifice, just tragic and sad things you're reading. However, similar to Thomas Hardy, you can sense a lot of tenderness in the story as well. A lot of tenderness towards the character from Hans Christian Andersen. So I just really enjoy that aspect as well. So how does the 1989 Disney adaptation compare to the original? One major difference is that in the 1989 version, there is no reference, there's none of the spiritual or religious references that the original novel has. So one major aspect of this book is when the Little Mermaid finds out from her grandmother that humans basically have immortal souls. Mermaids will live for 300 years, very long lifespans, but then they'll die and become sea foam, and that's it. And then, however, humans, though they have shorter lives than mermaids, their souls will live on and move on. So in the beginning of the fairy tale, the Little Mermaid has some fascination with the human world. She likes listening to her sisters and grandmother talk about the surface world. And then she goes to the surface, finds the prince, and then falls in love with him upon saving him. And it's only after, falling in love with the prince and, secretly visiting him, or visiting his palace, that she begins to have an increased desire to become part of the human world. And then following that, after learning from her grandmother about, the immortality of human souls, that's when, her whole desire for a soul comes into play. So basically, it started off with her falling in love with the prince and then wanting to have an immortal soul. So those were her two desires, and sort of the sequence of how she came to have them. For Ariel in The Little Mermaid, it's quite different. In the beginning of the film, she starts off, it's established from the beginning that she has a fascination for, the human world. And not only that, but she has a desire, a strong, powerful desire to become part of the human world. That's why I just love the song Part of Your World, because it's a great way of establishing her character, her wants and desires. The lyrics in the song, for instance, she says, flipping your fins, you don't get too far. Legs are required for jumping, dancing, strolling along down the street. It's already established from the beginning that she wants to become a human. She wants to have the human experience. And then shortly after, she sees Eric, she saves his life, and then she falls in love with him. So in the Disney adaptation, Ariel has this established desire, longing for the human world, and then she ends up falling in love with Eric, and he becomes sort of a part of that desire. So yeah, that's one major difference. That's a big major difference. Another one would have to be the role of the Sea Witch. Now, in the Disney adaptation, she has a much more antagonistic and active role. From the beginning of the film, Ursula, picks out Ariel as this pawn that she could use to get to Triton, to get to her goals of taking over the kingdom. And then when she sees that Ariel has fallen in love with a human, she views this as an opportune moment to strike. She makes sure to send out her henchmen when she's at her most vulnerable, when her grotto is destroyed by her father, and basically manipulating her in her vulnerable state along the way. And then on top of that, upon making the deal, she's actively cheating as well, basically maliciously and malevolently acting against Ariel. And because of this active role, this active antagonistic role that Ursula has, she sort of widens the scope of the film. This is unlike the fairy tale, where the Sea Witch is basically just a vehicle to have the Little Mermaid become a human. That's basically it. She doesn't serve, a greater purpose either other than that. And what I mean by like the widening of the scope, I think that's the third major difference I notice, because this is tied into the ending, which is drastically different, as I mentioned. In the original fairy tale, the story of the Little Mermaid is one that's pretty insular, or rather, it's very personal. This is this one character's longings, desires, and journey, and the story ends with her basically obtaining her goal. She is the only one basically affected. However, in the Disney animation, because Ursula is sort of given that, active, malevolent role, the stakes are risen. Also, with regards to the ending, the original fairy tale ends with, like I said, it's a personal joy that is obtained. She's the only recipient of that, joy and a reward. However, at the end of the Disney film, the themes have kind of broadened. They're more general. The film ends with Ariel and Eric, getting married, and you have these two worlds, the human world and the mer world, coming together as one, united through this union. And then, you have King Triton throwing the rainbow over the wedding barge to symbolize his blessing. So you have a larger theme of, like I said, two worlds coming together, while the original story is more of like, if you look at it, one of like personal, individual salvation. Those are like the three major differences that I noticed. The exclusion of like the spiritual and the religious, and what constitutes the desires of the main character, the role of the sea witch, and then sort of like the stakes, or rather like the range of the stakes at hand, and of the themes, like the ending themes, basically. So yeah, those are like the three major differences. One important thing, or rather theme, that I feel that are present in both stories, and that the 1989 version more or less kept from the original, is this theme of transcendence, which is something that I really liked seeing. So what I mean by transcendence is that you have the main character longing for something beyond their current state. So for the Little Mermaid in the fairy tale, a lot of that has to do with her desire to have an immortal soul, that her life not end at, in 300 years and she becomes sea foam, that she will be able to move on, go beyond than just the 300 years that is allotted to her. And then for Ariel, it changes a bit, so where she's not necessarily looking for an immortal soul, but she's still longing for something. She is longing for a world, an experience that is beyond her, that is beyond the one that she is living now. This yearning and reaching. And yeah, I feel like the Disney film, you have to give them credit, especially with that song, Part of Your World. It really is just a beautiful song. And one of my favorite lyrics of it is, bright young women, sick of swimming, ready to stand, ready to move on from what I currently am and to become a part of something, much larger, much bigger. I don't know, I think that's such a very deep, soulful theme. In many respects, Part of Your World is sort of similar to a prayer. She's not speaking her desires directly to a deity, of course, but it's the way she expresses herself, how earnest and just powerful her yearning is. Hans Christian Andersen's fairy tale is very soulful in many respects. And I like to think like the Disney animated version has a lot of heart. And I feel that the two complement each other very well, despite being very different. And so yes, they have a special place in my heart, as I said. That's it for my book plus movie discussion. I hope you guys enjoyed. Leave a comment down below. Have you read the original fairy tale? Have you seen the Disney film? Do you have a preference? And if so, please let me know. And until next time, see you later. Bye!